Good afternoon. I'm joined here at the headquarters of the Bureau of Meteorology by Commissioner Carleen York of the New South Wales State Emergency Service and Jane Golding of the Bureau of Meteorology, and we're here to provide a weather and operational update for you in relation to the weather events that we're seeing move through New South Wales currently. We're facing challenges on multiple fronts, with prolonged flooding through the west and northwest of New South Wales, renewed river rises through the central west and through the southern parts of New South Wales, and now the communities of the Northern Rivers region, the mid-north coast, the north coast, who have been really made flood weary over the past several months, facing an uncertain couple of days with weather conditions worsening and an event or a system moving through that part of the world. We're at the start of a very long season, we expect. This is the third consecutive La Nina. It has been declared by the Bureau of Meteorology, and as we have seen all year, our catchments, our landscapes are highly saturated. And this increases the risk of flash flooding and water coming up very, very quickly and catching people unawares. We'll hear from Jane from the Bureau very shortly in relation to a specific update of where things are at, but we can expect some heavy rainfall and some severe thunderstorms to continue over the next 24 hours, particularly through that mid-north coast area and up into the Northern Rivers region. The forecasts at the moment are variable and changing, and it's against this backdrop that I'm really asking people to please continue to work with the emergency services organisations, and we'll hear from Commissioner York in relation to some of those preparations that are well and truly underway and have been now for several days. And in fact, our emergency services organisations really haven't stopped for one day now for several months as we've experienced flooding right across New South Wales throughout this year. So I'm encouraging people to please keep a close eye on the warnings that are put out by the Bureau of Meteorology and work with the SES and our other emergency services organisations throughout this time, who are best placed to provide you with the information that you need to keep your family safe at this time and to make good decisions. We are on the brink of school holidays again, which is a fantastic time, especially in spring, when families can head off and enjoy some time together. But it's also a riskier time given the weather conditions that we're facing. So really asking people at this stage to work with us. And for those people in the Northern Rivers community, I understand your anxiety at this time. I've spent a good deal of time up there this year in my capacity as Minister for Flood Recovery. I understand that this is a challenging time. Our emergency services organisations are also aware that this is a difficult time for you and that you are likely to be more anxious at this time, which is completely understandable. So we are alive to this. We're working very closely together. We've got good preparations in place. And if you just continue to work with us, then we'll all enjoy the spring and the summer, which will be, a time for us to make sure that we stay up to date with all of the weather warnings given what we will be facing. Thank you. Jane, I'll hand over to you.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming along. I'll just brief you on the flooding situation over New South Wales, and then I'll hand over to Commissioner York. So over the last 6 to 8 weeks, the focus of the flooding has shifted from the coast over to the inland of New South Wales. And through that time, we've seen quite a few of our catchments west of the Great Dividing Range go into flooding, and several towns along over the inland of New South Wales be affected. Over the last 48 hours, we did see another system move through, and that's again exacerbated the flooding through the west, and we do have several flood warnings current I'll read out the list of them, but I just wanted to focus, I guess, on a few where we do have major flooding expected. So we do have flood warnings current over inland New South Wales for the Upper McIntyre, the Gwydir and the Castlereagh. Also the Peel and the Namoi, and major flooding expected at Weewar. The Macquarie, so major flooding expected at Warren, and that flooding expected to continue for several days. The Lachlan River, major occurring at Uabalong. Also flood warnings out for the Murrumbidgee, the Murray and the Edwards, the Colgoa, the Birri, the Bakara and the Narran, and we have major there at New Angledore, and also the Bogan, the Warrego and Peru. So quite many catchments over inland New South Wales are expecting flooding, and unfortunately with our climate drivers in phase, as they are at the moment with La Nina, a negative IOD and a positive SAM, those three climate drivers which really describe what's happening in the oceans surrounding Australia, means that we can expect more flooding over inland New South Wales over the next couple of months. Very similar to what we saw last year. So that system that moved through inland New South Wales over the last 48 hours is now focused on the north coast of New South Wales, and we have seen some locations see almost a couple of hundred mils fall within the last 24 to 36 hours. And we are expecting more rain and thunderstorms between now and late Friday or Saturday. So that rain is going to exacerbate flooding along the north coast. And we do have a flood watch current, which I'll just run through where that is in a minute. But broadly speaking, we're expecting areas to see 24-hour totals, 100, a bit above 100 millimetres, but there will be some bullseyes in there of some higher totals than that. And where those bullseyes are in particular, that's going to be where we see possibly some significant flash flooding issues. But regardless, that rain, that's really enough rain to cause the rivers to start rising, road ponding on roads, dangerous driving conditions, and also we'll see the ground's just so saturated at the moment across all of New South Wales that the gusty winds, that there's a bit of gusty wind around at the moment with this low pressure system, so we can expect to see some trees downed as well. So that flood watch has also been issued for the coast between the Queensland border and Wallumbri Brook, so that's from the Queensland border through down to the central coast. So that includes the Tweed, the Brunswick, the Richmond, the Wilsons, the Arara, the Nambucca, the Macleay, and also the Lower Hunter and Wallumbri Brook. Other catchments as well, no doubt I've left a couple off that list, and urging residents of the North Coast to head to the Bureau's web page and just have a look at that flood watch and to check if your area is affected. But if you're between the Queensland border and the Lower Hunter, we can expect to see some river rises in your area. I'd like to call out in particular the mid-north coast at the moment. So that area in particular has seen quite a lot of rain in the last 24 hours. So broadly they've seen 100 millimetres between about Grafton and a bit south of Coffs Harbour, and some parts of that have seen 170, 180 millimetres. So Loanna, that's one location, they saw 187 mils in the last 24 hours. Meldrum, that was another 175 millimetres. So just to summarise, flooding is a key concern obviously at the moment, and is expected to be a key concern unfortunately for several months, given how saturated the ground is and what our climate drivers are saying. In the short term, so the next day or two, we're really urging in particular residents along the north coast to just keep an eye on the forecast and the warnings. The rain's still occurring in this area, expected to keep falling through until late Friday or Saturday. We know that the rain can increase, particularly during the overnight hours, and we know that when the rain stops, the rivers will still keep rising. That's It's just the nature of riverine flooding. The rain comes first and then the rivers rise. So with that, I'll just hand over to Commissioner York to talk about preparedness.
Thanks, Minister. Thank you very much. So the New South Wales SES have been preparing for this, obviously working with the Bureau of Meteorology in the lead up to the declaration of the La Nina period that we've come into that has now been declared. We've been also working with our other partner emergency service agencies and police in preparation for the rains that we knew were coming. So at the moment we've got extensive flooding in the far west of New South Wales, and we're helping the communities out there not only in relation to those floodwaters but preparing as it comes down the river system, and also resupplying those small farms and townships that get cut off by the riverine flooding. Over the last week or so, this event has moved across the state into the central west and the southern parts of New South Wales, and we've got many volunteer members out there with other agencies helping those communities and preparing for and responding to those floods and requests for assistance from the community. So today we're obviously here of concern as this weather system moves across onto the coast and starts to affect some of those areas that have been severely impacted in previous floods over the last 6 to 9 months. The preparations are ongoing. We are doing a lot of communication in those areas at risk in the media as well as across social media, and there is a lot of information about how people can prepare for any flooding on our website, the SES website. So there's a few important messages I'd like to get across, and that is we've had 49 rescues in this event, flood rescues. We've had over 500 calls for assistance. It is really important that people see water across the road, that they do not drive into the floodwaters and they find some alternate route. It's also really important now, as the Minister said, we're coming into school holidays, and we know with the public holiday today, some people did take the opportunity to go early, but over this next 2 weeks, even though, as the Bureau, as Jane said, the rains may stop, there is still extensive flooding affecting roads, so it's important that you check the areas that you're going to drive to when you're on holidays. Don't put your family or friends in the motor vehicle at risk by driving through floodwaters. And as I said, we've had to go out, and it puts our volunteers at risk going out to rescue people out of floodwaters where their vehicles have been washed away. It's also important to plan. So we've had some calls for assistance where there's been flash flooding, and that will often come depending on the intensity of the rain. We've had one house owner that had water up to his knees outside his house, and when we got there it was a result of some blocked drains, so we cleared out the drains. But it's important, if it is safe to do so, clear out your gutters, make sure the drains are flowing so that you don't get the flash flooding and the water impacting your premises. We've had numerous calls to help farmers and other people with their farm animals. There have been some cattle that have been stranded by floodwaters, there's been horses that have needed to be moved, and we've worked with some other agencies in relation to getting those animals safe. So again, not only in the built-up areas but also in those country regional areas, to make sure that you are planning, that you look after your farm animals and you look after your family and yourselves. So have an emergency kit ready. We always say that you should be prepared. Listen to the warnings that we're putting out. An emergency kit would contain things like a torch with working batteries, a transistor radio, important documents, medication, maybe some water and some food if you have to go for a short period of time. Please be aware of the warnings and the information that the SES are putting out. We try to do it as early as possible. We work with the Bureau in relation to their forecasts, and then we see what that will impact those local and regional areas. So listen to our warnings, please heed those warnings, and when we say that you are under a flood warning, that means that it may escalate to a flood evacuation order. And it's really important to get out whilst you can. So that a flood evacuation order might mean that your premises are going to be affected, but it certainly might mean that the evacuation routes that you would normally take may be flooded at a certain time. So important to get out, really important to get to a place of safety. And if you go back and your home is safe, then you know it's not wasted time. It's about your safety, the safety of your families. So if you need assistance, as always, we ask you to ring 132 500. But if it is life-threatening, ring 000, and we will get assistance to you as soon as we possibly can. But again, it's important to understand that we need to work in partnership with our community. We need you to listen to our warnings. We need you to follow the directions that we give you so that you aren't placed in danger and that you aren't needing an emergency response. So thank you.
Minister, a question for you. I guess in terms of residents, particularly people living around Lismore, that Northern Rivers area, who are looking for some quite clear guidance on what's to come and what they should be doing, do you sort of have an idea of, I guess, the significance of this system and its impact on that area that we're going to see?
Absolutely, and I'll ask Commissioner York to provide some more specifics in relation to preparations in and around Lismore, but my heart goes out to the people of Lismore and other communities in that area, whether it be Corrakai on the Richmond, Tumbolgan, Broadwater. There are a number of communities who have been deeply affected, not once but twice, by major flooding through their communities this year. And of course, the wet weather really hasn't let up substantially for months. We know that it's impacted our ability to construct our temporary housing villages right across the Northern Rivers region. So, and it's hampered our flood recovery efforts more broadly. So very well aware of what our communities are going through up there. And to that end, we have increased resourcing. We're increasing our communications with the community and doing so through that lens of appreciating exactly what they've been through in recent months. Commissioner York, would you like to make some further comments?
So this afternoon, as the Minister said, we have, over the last day or so, increased communications, but there will be some further information coming out in some press conferences with local people with local knowledge up in that Northern Rivers area. We also have increased the number of boats we have available in that area, and we have placed a high clearance vehicle up there, which comes with a raft as well, so that it can get into areas that we could not otherwise drive to, and can pick up a lot of people, and if they've got domestic animals, take them to a place of safety. We have already set up a command centre up there at Gunnellabar, as we have in a number of other locations around the state, to respond appropriately to the weather that has been forecast. We are planning to the higher level of the forecast. Obviously, we have learned lessons from the past in relation to the intensity and what the rain can do in the flash flooding, not only the riverine flooding. So more resources, more boats in the Unimog, and we have placed additional helicopters on standby as well in a number of locations across the state.
So I guess in terms of the significance, those resources are being put in place as well as other places across the state. But in terms of Lismore, is there an expectation that there could be evacuation warnings for, I guess, at least low-level, low-lying areas and things like that today or tomorrow? What are you foreseeing?
I would think with forecasts of minor to moderate, there will be some evacuation orders going out for small areas or township or homes just in those low-lying areas. And there will be a number of warnings. So just watching what that forecast is, where the waters, where the rain falls and where the rivers will rise. But at this stage, we're watching it very closely over the next few hours to make sure that we get those warnings and information out to the community as quickly as possible.
So I guess it might be a bit difficult to sort of give any sort of comparison, but if we could give some kind of comparison, what would this sort of be at in terms of a level of comparison to, say, another event?
Yeah, I'll hand over to the Bureau for that one.
So this is a very different system to what affected the Northern Rivers in the February-March event, and then later again in March they had another follow-up system. So there's a couple of key points of difference that related to the late February, early March event. So that event occurred following a flood previous days before, so the rivers were already high. At the moment the rivers are low, so they'll start to rise, but they're not rising from a higher base. That's one point of difference. The system in February that produced some extraordinary rainfall. Some locations saw like 700 millimetres. It was a system connected to the tropics, which which we know can produce more rain. We're not seeing that in our models. at the moment. What we are seeing is enough rainfall to have us alert and fairly confident that we'll get to the minor level and possibly up to the major. It's really going to be where those bullseyes occur, so broadly 100 millimetres or a bit above in 24 hours. Some locations may be seeing 200 millimetres, so not the 800 millimetres that we were expecting. The timing as well, the rains, we're expecting the bulk of the rain to fall like between now and tomorrow morning, and then some follow-up tomorrow, and then the river will respond at Lismore following that, peaking late tomorrow night. So we've got a bit of time to watch how it unfolds, and right now we're just asking people to pay attention to what the SES is saying. We're working really closely together around new information that comes in, and to be keeping on top of the flood warnings that have been issued. So there is a flood warning out for Lismore at the moment with those timings on it. And again, if it was to get up to moderate or above, it will be late tomorrow. Does that answer? Yep.
And I guess, Minister, in terms of looking at other areas, the Mid-North Coast obviously was mentioned, the North Coast was mentioned, not just the Northern Rivers. What's the kind of, what should people there be expecting in terms of that preparation, I guess, and what's to come?
Well, I guess, look, from my perspective, really asking communities in those, or people in those communities in those areas, to keep an eye on a very close, watch on what the Bureau of Meteorology provides by way of updates, and also to work with the SES over the days ahead. We are heading into the school holiday period. Those areas are a lovely part of New South Wales and where a lot of families like to spend their holidays. So really asking people to work with us at this time, and as Commissioner York has already pointed out, to be prepared, to have some understanding of where you're going and what the weather conditions are that you might be faced with when you arrive, to be very safe on our roads. Our road network right across New South Wales has copped a smashing in recent months, and it's important that if you are on, whether they are familiar or unfamiliar roads to you, that you exercise great caution and drive to the conditions. And if there are floodwaters, if you are approaching water that is across the road, then don't proceed. Turn around and make alternative arrangements to get to your destination, because it simply isn't worth it. You place your life at risk, and if you're travelling with your family, then you place their lives at risk, and you place our emergency services volunteers who have just been doing this day in, day out now for months, you place their safety at risk as well. So just at this point in time, asking people to stay up to date with the warnings, keep working with us, and appreciate that we are at the start of what we think will be a long spring and summer in relation to these types of events rolling through, and it's important against that backdrop for people not to become complacent, and even if you've experienced flooding before, as we've said in the past, every flood is different, so and every weather system is different, and it produces different results, particularly when you've got a saturated landscape as we are facing presently. So just really asking people to remain vigilant, don't become complacent, and everyone will remain safe if that's the case.
And I guess, as you mentioned there, we've seen unpredictable weather systems in the past, and the Bureau hasn't quite been able to predict exactly what's going to happen and how much rain is going to fall. How confident are you that this time there is a good handle on I guess, this system that's coming through and the preparations that have been made?
Well, these systems are unpredictable. What I'm confident in is that the Bureau of Meteorology and the SES and our emergency services organisations are working very, very closely together. They're monitoring these situations right around the clock and constantly revisiting plans and the communication that goes out to the community. So we will continue doing that over the days ahead, and in fact I think we'll be doing this over the months ahead, in fact.
Just what?
Minister, just given the criticism levelled at the government and emergency services response to floods earlier this year, do you think we're in a better place or better resource to handle what we're likely to see this summer?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we even saw the response effort in the June-July flooding event, which deeply impacted the communities of Western Sydney. We saw no loss of life through that event, and after every single event, which is different, our emergency services organisations undertake reviews to learn what worked well and what can be improved on, and we look to implement those changes for any future events. So I'm absolutely confident that our emergency services organisations are better resourced than they ever have been, and we've seen record budgets announced for each and every emergency services organisation in New South Wales in recent months. And as we head into this summer and beyond, our emergency services organisations will continue to step up, work together and work with our communities to make sure that we keep people safe.
Commissioner, just a question for you. In terms of the 49 rescues that you referred to, where exactly were those, if there's a general area?
So I can get them to you after the press conference, but some have now been on the Central Coast and Mid-North Coast. A lot of them were in the Central West and the southern parts of New South Wales over the last 24 hours. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.